Welcome to the Field Lab podcast. We know that you're all here because you're passionate about health, learning about true health. Maybe it's keeping your health, maybe it's finding your health, maybe it's helping someone else with their health. We all have different reasons why we're here. If you run a human day connected to a really good environment that's filled with light, water, magnetism, that's filled with love and community, that is how humans default to health. In the field, patients come to me all the time, fully believing that if they just do all the right things, they'll make steady progress until they finally achieve health again. When they experience a bump in the road or an odd symptom comes back, they're frustrated or confused. My message to them is always this: healing is not linear because nature isn't linear. The only constant is change, and each season plays a distinct role in creating a coherent whole. This means that true healing doesn't happen in a straight line. It's more circular, and that's actually on purpose. But true healing is always possible if you can stay in flow with the decentralized network of nature and give your body the time it needs. I want to mention that we choose to address this subject because it's very timely. The moment between the spring equinox and the summer solstice is actually the moment when symptoms tend to reemerge. And I get it, it's discouraging. But once you understand why, you can reframe it as a sign that you are actually on the right track. And that is so empowering. In part one, we'll talk about healing through the lens of redox potential. And I'll tell you why the time between spring equinox and summer solstice, in particular, is often the most challenging for people in their healing journey and what you can do about it. In part two, which is available exclusively to premium members, we'll address the other 3 seasons, redox potential as a function of your full day and your full year, and how to create an environment that supports the biophysics of healing. Now let's dive into the conversation.
Okay, so we're in an interesting moment of the year where we're coming into the solstice, and a lot of people are saying that they're having reemergence of old symptoms, things they haven't experienced in a long time. They're sensing and feeling like this healing journey isn't necessarily going in a forward progression or a linear progression. They're wondering like what is going on. So I think we should acknowledge that that's a real phenomenon that does happen. And we should also kind of start with the definition of what is healing, what is health in the biophysical sense, and why is it maybe not something that is always linear.
Yeah. So let's define too. We're talking about the summer solstice
Hmm.
because I think it's important to compare it to winter solstice because definitely there's a difference in the healing journey. So I think this is a really relevant conversation right now because the approach to summer solstice, clinically, we see this being often a challenging time for people on how we define the healing crisis, the healing journey. So I think it's really helpful to talk about this because we see a lot of patients experience this. And oftentimes we only really get to talk about it if they're coming in for visits at that time.
Right.
So sometimes we don't hear this from patients until we see them much later
Right.
on.
After the fact.
And although it's really helpful to talk about it and talk through it and try to understand it after the fact, it would be more helpful for people to understand this bigger idea in one's own healing journey to then really feel empowered around the process.
Right.
Because ultimately, we have to think about health through the lens of biophysics. So when we're talking about health, we're not talking about, I want to say, healthy living, which is
Right.
probably from what we normally hear is like most people say, like they're healthy because they eat healthy and they exercise.
Mhm.
They take downtime. Like the definition of health in modern times, we we do like an intake form, right? So
Right.
there's a spot in the intake form of actually asking people like what do they do for what do they do for to be healthy?
Right.
And it's always kind of the same thing. I eat well, I
Mhm.
exercise, I, relax, I watch TV, I read a book, like those types of things, which is definitely what defines how most people think about health. If you're following along Field Lab, though, hopefully you're starting to gain this deeper understanding of health is redox potential.
Right.
Health is running health at the cellular level, which is biophysics, then running alongside biochemistry in this decentralized network
Mhm.
of living structure. So that's a very important distinction because, of course, if you kind of plug into this way of thinking, and then if you're really deeper journeying along, you make a choice, a totally different choice about health. That once you understand that biophysics is the way you want to think about health, you now have to create a probably very different day than you've been living previously.
Mhm.
One that's connected to light and dark, one that's connected to energy and information. And once you start doing that, now you've opened up an opportunity for healing.
Like true
True
healing.
healing, different than again, like, this is so important that we define it because healing, if you think about it similarly to how you might think about health as being healthy eating, healthy,
Mhm.
exercise, healing then might be doing a cleanse. Healing might be doing an elimination diet. Healing might be starting a 12-week challenge at the gym. And that can come with feelings of
How
crisis.
yeah.
Yeah, so again, I wanna, like language is so manipulated here because you could have a healing crisis, and quite frankly, we've seen mostly we see that. Patients
Mhm.
come to us, they've done these cleanses, especially nowadays, like these parasite cleanses, these detoxes, they're doing calorie restriction, they're doing exercise regimens, and frankly, like, they'll associate the feeling really bad with the words that we're going to use, which are healing crisis, and then they think, "Oh, well, this has gotta be okay. This has
Mhm.
to be okay. I might feel like I'm half dead, but I must be going through a healing crisis, and that is a good thing."
Right.
And we're here to kinda challenge that again, because, like, we've seen this in, like, clinical practice that ultimately, that's really what people need to move beyond, but it's so hard to move beyond that unless you kind of layer this different way of thinking,
Mm.
that if you understand that health is the redox potential of your whole self, and that healing is the journey then of reconnecting each and every cell to reloading redox potential. Now, healing is the process to get there, which can and will be work
Mhm.
to restore your health, and it will come most often with healing crises that we are tying back to more ancient wisdom that a lot of ancient like medical when there was truly like an art to medicine would describe. I learned it in medical school through the traditional Chinese model, and we always kind of share how we've gone back to look at a lot of medical history, and it quite appears that all ancient medical wisdom described these healing crises without knowing about biophysics,
Right.
but through this lens.
They were just observing how people move through the process.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's again a cool moment to step back because we are approaching the summer solstice, and we've seen in these last few months many patients in this healing crisis state. And it's because, a lot of our patients, it might be they're potentially years into this journey.
Mhm.
It might be the first moment they're getting into then this spring, from spring to equinox to summer solstice moment. And I think it's just really helpful that if we can teach more people
Mhm.
about this, most likely being something that you should anticipate, it can really soften the blow of the choice for health, which is definitely not the easier choice when you understand and choose biophysics based health.
Mhm. I think we should also talk about why do people assume healing is gonna just be this linear forward progression
Yes.
without
Yeah.
any kind of bumps in the road?
Yeah, this is true, right? That if we think about anyone plugged into the modern medical system, it's really built to be nice. That
Mhm.
I hate to say that word
Yeah, it's a lot
nice,
of, like,
but
making
like
you feel
it's
good.
really about trying to make you feel better, to band-aid the moments of not feeling well.
Mhm.
A lot of the concept is, oh, you've got this problem, here's the solution. And like honestly, there's really very little conversation about that being something that you do and then recover from.
Right.
Like, mostly in the chronic disease model, it's you've got especially what I see, like, if someone's going through a acute health crisis, a lot of even, like, seasonal depression, I'll often ask them, "Hey, what's the game plan here?" If they've started a medication, and most often they'll say, "I don't know." Like, instead of
Right.
saying, "Hey, is this a 3-month plan? Is it a 6-month plan?" There's no plan because really now medicine has become very linear. Like once you have something, it's now your diagnosis,
Mhm.
and then you're going to need to be treated forever
Mhm.
because there is the assumption that it will never get better.
Right.
It will never go away. And not to the fault of like the traditional medical system, but really that's what they see in practice. They don't see somebody with anxiety solve their anxiety. They don't see someone with high cholesterol solve their high cholesterol. They don't see someone with hypertension solve it.
Mhm.
So what they see is that truth for them. And now it is just a linear progression of disease that you need to treat.
Right.
Disease, treat, and
Just up more
yes.
medication,
And
more
maybe
iron.
the curve will soften if we can treat it,
Mhm.
but it's never we kind of look at it as like a spiral. It's never a spiral back to like a resolution.
Right. Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, like this is really where our passion lies is how do we get here? Again, if you're
Mhm.
following along, it's like you can see where it's so deeply embedded in the modern medical system that's then created this entrapment of the
Mhm.
way of thinking.
So centralized medicine has kind of tricked people into thinking that by masking the symptoms, they're healing, and by upping the medication, they're further mask.
Better.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
kind of solving the issue at a deeper level, but that's not true healing, is what you're saying.
No, and I know a lot of times they say, "Oh, it's just genetic,"
Mhm.
or, like, I don't even really know what's happening because most
I don't think
patients
they really
aren't
explain it
really
anymore.
asking. There's not time to
Mhm.
do it. There's the assumption that you have this, you can never heal from it.
Mhm.
And it's really a sad moment
Right.
in modern medicine that it's now what's considered the normal, and most patients don't even know this is possible.
Mhm.
Now, again, like it's a harder choice though. The harder choice is the one we're talking about where you have to be okay with the fact that you might stir up some old stuff in your body
Mhm.
that might show up as symptoms, and that can be really uncomfortable, which again is like why if you understand it better, it can really help you to continue to work through it, so that way you're ultimately free from those things instead of, needing to treat them for the rest of your life.
So it's kind of a reframing of it as part of the journey, part of you actually, I guess, in a way, moving in the right direction, but maybe it's not always about feeling like it's going with like
Yeah, it's
it's a
being
little bit more
okay with that it's
complicated.
not linear,
Right.
that when the body has built enough redox potential,
Hmm.
especially in the areas that were weak,
Right.
ultimately you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Hmm.
So if you can think back, everyone can think back into something health related.
Hmm.
The more complex a person's disease pattern is, obviously, the more you might have to work through healing.
Right.
But if you understand where your body went wrong,
Hmm.
then you can anticipate potentially where the healing crisis, how we're talking about it, is then going to show up.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Why would that change on a seasonal basis?
Yeah. So, okay, should we design? I think this is the next step is like, hopefully it's clear.
Hmm.
And we're going to, again, we're going to like go into the part two with the deeper biophysics based stuff. We're just trying to keep it simple. It might sound really weird to someone hearing this for the first time, but I also realize like it's very like human intuition that there has to be some way to heal.
Exactly. I think people know at a really deep level that we're capable of it, even
Yes,
though we're told repeatedly we're not.
exactly. And that I also think the deep intuition is that if you do that process, most likely that's not just going to only linearly feel better in
Hmm.
that journey.
Right.
That most people realize there's probably at some moment that I'm going to have some troubles. We're here to cut. This is like the talk about navigating through that because I think there's a deep intuition, but then a lot of people are so disconnected from that that
Hmm.
it's even though that might be a deep intuition, they're normalized to you can't heal,
Hmm.
health should be linear, and just go on that journey because why would you want to suffer?
Would you encourage people not to associate healing with feelings
Yeah,
in a
that's
way?
also true. Like
Like,
you have to really try to disconnect from just feelings because sometimes the feelings are going to be something that will trick you.
and
It
I mean, you
feeds.
say it all the time. Like, you could make somebody feel awesome with supplements
Yeah,
pretty instantly, but that's not true healing.
healing.
And it's not bringing
Exactly.
back redox potential.
Exactly. So, should we talk about like the why it's not linear
I
is
think
that
that's
if we have to kind of talk about time here. But time for humans is very synced to time on planet Earth. So we've got this day cycle, this 24-hour cycle. But then we have we're going to talk about a deeper year-long cycle. And then there's over the course of your life. But the one we're really going to dial in on is what's happening over the course of a year.
Mhm.
And the year is really synced to the, revolution of the sun, so now we've got this journey of let's keep it simple. We've got the spring equinox, the summer solstice, the fall equinox, and the winter solstice. So that's easy to look up. Like that, those are timestamps that you want to kind of, if you're thinking about this for yourself, like map that out on a calendar.
Mhm.
And what's really happening in health is the changing of the light and dark cycles are very significant between those markers.
Okay.
So what we're talking about right now is really spring equinox to summer solstice
Mhm.
in what we see in practice as being quite significantly when healing crises moments like stir up.
And people kind of associate this with the easiest, best time of the year. So I think that's what gets them discouraged
Really
sometimes.
hung up is
Yeah.
that everyone, I mean, where we live in Connecticut, it's like, who doesn't love
This is awesome.
spring?
Yeah.
Like when you're coming out of the winter, everything's growing green, like, oh, the days are getting longer, it's getting warmer. There's just really an awesome rebirth that, like, no one doesn't recognize, like,
Right.
for the most part. Like, everyone's recognizing that. Now, that should be easy to step back and realize how would you think that your body is not doing the same thing?
I mean, it's coming alive. Like everything's coming alive right now, including
Yes.
your deeper health.
So if you have healing to do, because again, like we're the distinction there is you may not have ever felt this way
Mhm.
in your when you were in a strong state of redox, when circadian function was strong, go back to your childhood when you would never feel any health issue. It's because if there was nothing to heal,
Mhm.
truly nothing to heal, you wouldn't feel it. You would
Right.
just
You move through the transition,
move
seeing those
through it,
same.
feel great, grow, and move on,
Mhm.
which is what nature tells us is the normal state.
Right.
When you've disconnected from that, the coolest thing is that you can plug back into health and do healing,
Right.
but it will very much be tied to this time of the year because of the environment.
What's unique about the environment right now?
So we know that and again, this will be more in the part two, but the cool thing is if you really think about the light, what's different now compared to fall is that the days are getting longer, the light's getting stronger, but when you dial into the frequencies, the blue light is the part that's really tied to the story of time and driving healing is that as the blue light spectrum is getting l- longer, stronger, that's really tied to speeding up time inside the cells, and that can really turn on a massive healing drive because
Mm.
ultimately in nature, it's always linked to the UV spectrum concurrently getting stronger. And with that comes a massive energy and information potential to actually do healing
Right.
and repair and potentially energetically strong enough to do apoptosis. Like if cells need to delete, there has to be a strong light signature in the environment to do that.
Mhm.
During the winter, it's not really there potentially. It's more about autophagy, repair. This is now when everything is powerful enough and the signal strong enough that if your body is capable of doing it, if you've done the work over the fall and the winter to prep the body to do healing,
Mhm.
it's going to show up in the spring and oftentimes really ramping up until the summer solstice. It might hang out for a little bit and then might decrease
Okay.
again. And that's the year of health you really want to think through,
Mhm.
knowing and anticipating that if you've plugged into this health is a choice journey, that your first spring into summer solstice, if you've done enough work and the redox potential is strong enough to heal, probably something is going to creep back in. And oftentimes, like I know we'll talk about like like the unraveling of the onion. It's gonna be something from your health past. And
Always.
sometimes it's like something that you didn't have at all recently, and you might remember it back. And this is sort of that ancient Chinese wisdom I remember learning in medical school. I kind of didn't really fully understand until I understood decentralized health.
Mhm.
That when I helped patients I thought maybe I was helping them unravel the onion, but really it wasn't until this that I realized, I think, what they were speaking toward.
Right. Absolutely. And it's kind of like a spectrum. You move into disease, you have to move back into health through that same journey.
It is really an impossibility to expect anything but that,
Mhm.
which is, I think, I mean, we always go back to the why of like, how did medicine control this story so much? Well, that's uncomfortable for a lot of people. Like, if you don't understand what we're talking about, how would anyone be comfortable doing that journey on their own?
Mhm.
That's the problem, is that most people plug into the centralized medical system because it's more comfortable. It is easy. It's doesn't, ruffle the feathers of your health, like,
Yeah, it's minimal work.
it's just minimal work. You
Right.
you have people are so bogged down doing life
Mhm.
that it's the easier
Right. It's the perfect
choice.
modern, unfortunate
Yeah,
choice,
but
but
it
it's not
really
true
is
health.
just because of the times
Mhm.
that we've even normalized that that is what most people are doing,
Right.
and it's really unfortunate because and I think it's an important moment to say, why are we talking about this? Because unfortunately health is just eroding. And when young people are starting to be sicker and sicker and sicker, how are we ever going to be able to continue, human existence if younger people don't know what we're talking about,
Right.
because they will never be able to achieve optimal health. And then what happens with reproducing and just, living a
The whole
human
situation.
existence, it looks and feels sometimes very tragic if we don't level up.
Mhm.
I think that it's just happening. Younger people are realizing, what am I gonna do if I'm not unwell? If I'm unwell my whole life?
Right.
So things are shifting. We
Right.
see more younger patients. We see more younger patients stepping back and saying, like, this is not normal. I don't understand it,
Mhm.
but they'll find us because of typically referral or something.
Mhm.
And that's really encouraging, and really what motivates us to have these conversations
Right.
is that someone needs to talk about it,
Right.
because maybe this will reach enough people that it becomes the newer way of thinking.
And I find that the younger people are more willing to accept this reality and this kind of true health progression where it might not be linear. Whereas some of like the older people are so ingrained in that centralized model that as soon as something reemerges, they just quit and they're done.
Yeah, which then is maybe a good moment to talk about how the different generations, because there's such a disparity of redox potential between the 65 plus generation, and then sort of the 20 years below that, the 20 years below that, and now the new generations. But the redox potential, the span between those generations is
It's
massive,
like two different humans.
very much so. Whereas those that are 65 plus, when they were kids, the span of redox was pretty much the same. Like,
Mhm.
the story had been the same because of transgenerational epigenetics and all of the other deeper concepts, which you can find on, Field Lab. But that's where we're at, that the younger people kind of have no choice.
Mhm.
The older generation, though, those that find us and can embrace what we're talking about, they're the ones who intuitively, they don't want to be on 10 meds. They don't want to be part of the
Tied to that
experiment. They
system.
don't want to be tied to the system. And they also realize that they knew plenty of older people who were not.
Mhm.
So there's that like cool experiment happening there for that age group, that those that are willing to kind of step outside and realize that, gosh, what was normal for them growing up, they want. They
Mhm.
don't want to be the 90-year-old on the 20 meds. And they are the age group that can often listen to what we're talking about, embrace what we're talking about, and like move through their healing journey quickly. Whereas a younger person, it might take 3, 4, 5 years. Sometimes the older patients take, 1 or 2 summers and like
Get
they're
pretty good.
good.
Yes.
They weren't far off from a strong redox potential. And that's again like the cool part of the story is like anyone can choose health, like true health, biophysics based, decentralized health. And anyone can choose that to drive a healing process, no matter how old you are. It's
Mhm.
never too late. It just might look different for you based on where you began, where you journeyed, and then where you are in your current life, which is why this conversation is being had, is to help you as your own health
Mhm.
experiment be able to understand like what should I expect from me?
So a younger person should expect this moment of the year to maybe be more challenging and to see
Exactly.
some reemergence of symptoms, but again, it's the reframe of that as being part of the journey. Whereas an older person who had more of a redox potential, kind of had this bigger battery, maybe won't experience it or not to the same degree.
It is what we see
Yeah.
like in clinical practice. It's what we see over and over and over again,
Yeah, it never
which is,
fails.
we the value of getting to work with so many patients
Mm,
is that we do see reality.
mhm.
And to someone in centralized medicine, that could look really confusing. It looks like it's maybe a mess.
I can imagine.
Yeah, like it looks like a mess. Like if you think that the centralized health model is the correct model, then that looks 180.
Right.
That, oh my gosh, why would you let somebody go through a healing crisis?
Yeah, why would you let them have symptoms of any type? That's like the whole model is mask the symptoms,
Right.
just
But
make people
then
feel
when
good.
we can say now, being, truly from like a using this model with patients, like 6 years into using this model, that we can say we've seen patients then go through this healing journey and be freed
Mhm.
of the health issues that brought them to us in the first place, where that is just such a powerful message that people need to be able to make the choice for themselves of whether or not they want that.
Mhm.
Some people might want the centralized model, but ultimately it should be a personal choice. But it can't be if no one's speaking this
Right.
truth.
Or educated.
Yeah, but I think that from a medical standpoint, there's I know there's very few clinicians that have this perspective,
Mhm.
because if you're practicing medicine, mostly it's centralized. It's even the functional medicine is centralized. So no one is really, and I didn't see this either. I mean, definitely I can look back to all the years of my practice before I really truly started practicing decentralized medicine, is that I never really saw a lot of true healing. There would be those moments where I think it was tied to the patients that had strong redox potential. Like definitely this is why it was confusing initially, is I saw patients get better,
Mhm.
but then I look back and I think it was never probably true healing if they didn't reconnect with circadian biology and decentralized health, that eventually something would probably pop back up
Mhm.
if they were not living a decentralized life.
Gotcha. So then is the bigger goal that every spring moment, it gets a little bit better, or is it not linear even in that sense?
It's a good question that we've had a lot of patients who, kind of like the unraveling the onion, will deal with something in their spring season, and then it will go away.
Mhm.
And then the next spring season, it will almost seem like something completely different.
Okay.
And then that will go away. And then it might be something totally different. Like that is It sounds
So it's just
bizarre, but it's absolutely what we've seen over and over and over again in actual reality.
Mhm.
So we're speaking reality here. It's clearly what's happening. Trying to understand it is what this conversation's about, and we'll kind of save our thoughts around the deeper biophysics for the part two as to why that's happening, how to understand it, like that's also really interesting to us. I know not always interesting to everybody,
Yeah.
but if you're just wanting to know what to do as you're getting through this process, it's having anticipation. There are ways to make things more gentle.
Mhm.
And, that's important to understand that if it's happening for you, maybe there are things that can help you to get through that.
Mhm.
That maybe it's the last thing we should talk about before
Right.
we go into the deeper science is that what do you do? I mean, do you have to suffer through it? Well, you do have to work through it. The body will have to work through it, and that's part of the journey of like the work. You cannot have health without work.
Mhm.
But sometimes it's, these are where the ideas around diet change and movement and breath practice and mindfulness and community and all of those concepts probably came from ancient wisdom where, maybe it's a moment that dialing in on your diet can be really helpful. Maybe it's a moment where dialing in on like fasting practices before bedtime, like true intermittent fasting. So that way when you're sleeping, the repair process is easier on the overall body. Like maybe it's that you need to dial back on your exercise and just walk instead of doing hardcore exercise. Like maybe it's you want to put in some cold therapy
Mhm.
and some more proper sun exposure.
Right.
Maybe you need to go to bed a little earlier. Maybe you need to be in community. Maybe you need to go find a strong magnetic environment.
Right.
If you know those things, you can really powerfully connect to what we're saying. And this is just reminding me that a lot of times patients will realize that as they go through this journey, that the healing crises will start later and later and later. That's another
Mhm.
thing we see in practice where what maybe would emerge very quickly might get a little delayed as your redox potential improves. I think it's one of our intentions behind like doing those, and it's important because like when we did the health field trip in El Salvador was very purposeful time wise.
Mhm.
That ultimately it was there to help fill in the redox potential pre that spring equinox moment so that way if you went back into your environment, you'd be a little more charged to
Right.
potentially do that healing crises with a little more ease. And those that had come to the health field trip, we got a lot of that feedback. They
Oh, they
actually
experienced it.
they totally
Mhm.
experienced that where things that would normally pop up earlier didn't really pop up as quickly, which is another way of understanding how could you use a week vacation for
Right.
health timed properly. These are just tools to really help you get by.
Mhm.
Ultimately, then you'll get to the point where you have strong redox potential. And now, if you go somewhere that time of the year, you might just use it to fully restore your battery
Right.
to then
Get
have
ahead.
this is longevity and optimal health that we're talking about that we see as human potential is who knows what our potential is,
Right.
but the only way we can get there is if we keep leveling up our health every year,
Mhm.
working through these seasons. That hopefully that's a good place to start without going too deep into the science part of it, but to be helpful that like this is really a choice you can make for yourself that really was not an opportunity 20 years ago. And, maybe really not until now,
Mhm.
which is a really fun moment to be living
Right.
during.
So the reframe for people is that the year and the light cycle is constantly in flux in our health journey, and healing journey as a result also is in flux. So we can't think about it being linear. You have to see it as a progression and work that you go through kind of year after year. And at some point that will 100% pay off, but
Yeah, I mean, it's
takes a
like,
little bit of time.
the spirals, like we're constantly spiraling back, and like this is the time of the year where you're going to kind of spiral on to what might need to be where your body puts attention toward healing in your more fragile areas of redox potential,
Right.
which is just so powerful when you realize the body each and every year like can keep driving more health,
Hmm.
which is really cool.
Yeah. It's
And
awesome.
it kind of obliterates the normalized way of thinking is that you'll just linearly
Hmm.
progress to disease and aging and degrade and dysfunction and needing to, be on meds and being treated. And not to say that there isn't a use case for those sometimes. That is not the normal state of human health.
Right.
And we are here to push back against that.
Perfect.
Okay, let's save the other fun stuff.
Yeah, we'll go a
for
little
too.
deeper.
Okay. It's what we see like all the time
Mhm.
in practice, where that is sometimes just an uncomfortable part of the journey that feels really unfamiliar. 'Cause, like, if you're not doing health, how we're talking about, you never feel any of this. It's just like a dead battery. It's powerful to harness that darkness and the cold and the simplicity of like food at that time too, where everything becomes a moment of running probably more beta oxidation, like pulling more stem cells, pulling from your body's stored fat mass, like all that insulin resistance that might have brewed gets turned off by nature, by the environment. And now winter being that winter solstice to spring equinox is, if you reframe it, is sometimes like the most powerful moment. You may almost want your body to go through a healing crisis because then it tells you you have enough energy built within your system to do that. If you keep following along and then seeing your body transition then after summer solstice, back into that phase, and then you start looking at it through that lens, you realize, wow, we have 4 distinct times of the year. This is really how health is playing out for everyone.
Right.
It may not be as extreme for everyone depending on where you live and everyone depending on your haplotype. It's something to consider that most people are going through this non-linear journey, ups and downs, kind of spiraling back, going through ups and downs. And now once you realize that that's just normal, that's the normal state. The normal state is not a linear progression.